tough weekend. I mean, I think that was pretty obvious. We struggled, especially in serve receive. I think that was the one part of the game that I really I didn't expect this to be that bad. I didn't expect this to be great in that part of the game, with several players being out there and doing that for the first time. But it was probably more of a struggle in that phase of the game than I expected. And then when that happens, of course, the rest of the game gets very difficult. And so I think that was probably the biggest story, the biggest takeaway from the weekend. A lot of kids grew up. A lot of kids got to go through those first game jitters, learn what it takes to play in a challenging match, play in a challenging environment. I think our first match was that. And I think we had some kids rise to the challenge. I think that was, like I said last week, I think we would know more about our freshmen after we got through the weekend. And I think we do. I think we know more about them than we did a week ago, and mostly good. And there's some things that I think we had some weaknesses that were exposed, even in returners, even in upperclassmen, that maybe we didn't fully know were there because Mal, in her considerable speed and defensive range and athletic ability, can cover a lot of other people's weaknesses. And when she wasn't out there this weekend, I think that showed in a number of players, partly just her play, partly her serve receive ability to take a number of balls, but also her leadership. I think that not having her voice out there may have been the biggest loss that we had this weekend from any person that wasn't on the court. And but it was good. It was good to see kids grow. I mean, you hate to take the losses. I mean, they were not really competitive games. You know, they were blowouts, a lot of them, and those are hard. Those are hard to be on the court and play. Those are hard to stand on the sidelines and watch. They're hard, you know, in this case, Mal was actually in the building, but way up in the stands watching. And so she got to see it. And those are tough. Those are tough to live through, but they're needed, honestly. When you aren't where you need to be, you need to have a very clear picture that we aren't there. And I think the only little moment that we were misguided on that is when we left Western Kentucky. We were encouraged by it, which is good, but then I think the next morning it led to a slight sense of complacency, and that went away pretty quickly, I think, after that match. And so I think our team has a good understanding of the areas that we need to improve, and as we get a little healthier, start getting some kids back, then of course that will help raise the level of play as well. This next week, of course, we have Marshall tomorrow. They had an interesting weekend as well. I watched two of their matches. One of their matches that they struggled, and the other match they played against Indiana, they played really well. They lost, but they played really well. So I expect that to be a very, very competitive match. And I think going into next weekend, it's a field that isn't quite as strong as the field that we had here, but still good volleyball. And still a couple of teams that were top 80 teams last year, probably similar to Gulf Coast, and teams that will need to play well to beat. And so we're looking forward to this week. We certainly would like to get a win on the record book pretty soon. Everyone right now, I think, is pretty understanding that, hey, we're young, we're learning, and got a little beat up, maybe coming out of preseason, but we don't want to use excuses. And we weren't good enough this first weekend, and we need to be better next weekend. And so that's what we'll be working on today.
Coach, you said you realized your team just wasn't there this past weekend. Is that something that you evaluated over the couple of games, or did you kind of have that feeling before you even got into the weekend?
I think the serve receive we knew was going to be a struggle. We just didn't know it was going to be that big of a struggle. I mean, I would have never imagined that we would have gone into a 3-set match and got aced as many times as we did against Gulf Coast. I mean, that better be an aberration. That better not be who we are right now. But numbers are true, and that's who we were this weekend. And so we're literally about to go down to practice, and we'll have 2 courts set up. In court 1, we'll have our ball machine, affectionately known as Lewis in our program. And literally that court for 3 hours will do nothing but serve receive. So at every minute of the 180 minutes of practice, someone will be passing a ball. And on the other court, we'll work on everything else we need to work on. And we'll just kind of cycle kids through both courts as we need. But if passing doesn't work, then nothing else really matters after that. Then your setter's running all over the place. Then your offense really can't get established, have any level of consistency. So I think that was the part when I say that we weren't there. That was just made painfully aware, to us. And I think beyond that, I think just learning the mental side and just learning how to fight. I think we had it in little spurts, and how to be mentally strong for a long period of time. And West Kentucky is a great example. We hit really well the first set, lost a close one, and then we just started spraying balls. The second set, we're just error. I mean, I don't mean errors like they blocked it. I mean unforced, just hitting errors out of bounds. I mean hitting balls out of bounds. We hit some balls literally outside the antenna, hitting balls in the middle of the net. I mean, just kind of crazy things, you know. And then we got right back to the next two sets playing really good volleyball. We had, and I think the third set, if I remember, we had 19 kills and 4 errors, and 2 of those were blocks. So we had 19 kills and only 2 unforced errors. And what we go for is about a 3-to-1 plus to minus ratio as far as earning our points versus giving away points. And that was close to 10-to-1. And so that was amazing for being night one. And so I think our kids, they're learning right now to kind of initiate their own energy, initiate their own sense of rising to a certain level of play. That night it was a little easier because big crowd, first game, top 25 opponent, all those things. And I just think the rest of the weekend, when we had to bring all of that out of ourselves, we didn't do that this weekend. And that's what we'll need to do this week for sure.
And, Coach, who impressed you the most coming out of this weekend? If you had to pick one person, and then on the other side of that, who are you going to expect a lot more from going ahead?
Yeah, Lizzie. I mean, I think that's kind of a no-brainer after this weekend. I mean, I saw what you guys saw. Fearless attacker. I mean, she needs to get more athletic. She needs to do some things and needs to cut down on error rate, as every freshman hitter in the country needs to. But boy, did I love her mindset. I mean, she just didn't care like in a bad way. I mean, just didn't care. And that's the same way that Kavanaugh from Western Kentucky, number 7, that's a much older, much stronger, much higher level, as far as athlete. But she has that mentality. I mean, she has the mentality of like, I'm going to go up and hit every ball until you like it. And that's just, I was really impressed with Lizzie in that way. I think, obviously, she has a lot of things to work on, her serve receive, a bunch of areas, but her ball striking and just the percentage of balls that came off her hand with high pace was pretty impressive for a kid in their first match. And our trusty stat crew, Mike Ashcraft and friends, found out that it was 16 kills, the most by any Bobcat in their debut since 2003, I believe. Katie Smith, I believe, was the last person. And so that's an impressive start, by her. I think the other side of that, the kid that had probably an unusual weekend, I thought, was Jamie. She, in her first match, she hit 385, but didn't really hit well. And I mean, she's already come in today. She wanted to come in and watch videos, so of course we've done that. And it was a very unusual weekend, and the stats really didn't tell the story, because she had one match she didn't hit well, and the stats on paper said she played great. And then she had one match that I thought she was striking the ball really well, but she was just hitting it right at people. And so she comes out not having a good percentage. And so it's just kind of an unusual weekend for her. I think part of that, and I had this discussion with her earlier today, Jamie's kind of flipping the role from setter to hitter. For the last 2 years, a setter's job was to make a young hitter look good. And Jamie was the hitter. And now it's reversed. And now it's a junior hitter that her job is to make a younger setter look good. And that takes some time. And that takes some learning how to adjust to different sets, putting your body in position that you hope everything goes right, but if it doesn't, put your body in a place that you can fix it. I mean, I kind of used the analogy today with Jamie. It's kind of like defensive driving. You don't ever plan on something horrible happening, but you have to be aware that something might not go perfectly, and so how do I make the best out of the situation? And that's what she has to learn. And she has to switch from Abby Akira, and I've seen that kind of in 2 ways. I mean, Kelly Lamberti came before Abby and kind of did that, and then Abby helped Jamie, and now Jamie has to help a younger setter. And that's just part of the normal cycles that we have in volleyball, and that's just a learned skill that she'll need to develop.
You mentioned how impressive Lizzie was, and now that you're starting to get healthy, potentially now back tomorrow, if not probably this weekend, how do you give Lizzie reps when those 2 are ahead of her and it'd be tough to take them off, especially front row?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? And that's not just a challenge for you sitting there and saying, hey, I got this question that I bet's good. Yeah, it's a great question. And I ask myself the same question right now. I don't have a great answer other than I would say I think any returning starter, for me to be fair to them, they need to get some time out on the court with all the starters together as a unit. and see what that looks like. I think Brooke this weekend was great in serve receive, pretty average on defense, But part of that, okay, she's learning a new position, but also part of that we need to see what that looks like with Mal next to her, who's a phenomenal back row defender, and even when Mal's a front row defender, is also on the other side of her. We need how does Jamie look attacking when we're in system more, when we're passing better because Mal's back, and she's our best passer, And so I think that's kind of how I look at it. Is Lizzie this weekend went from a really good sub, it's kind of what we thought she was going to be before the weekend, to someone who can absolutely start for us this year. Now, whether she will or not, we'll have to all wait and see. And that's going to be a competition that will be ongoing between Mal, Jamie, and Lizzie. Other kids are competing, but certainly Lizzie showed this weekend that she's ready to play at that level. But I think we need to understand at the same time there's some kids that have had lots and lots and lots of good weekends that we don't take one bad weekend and, you must be terrible. Even though you're jumping 3 inches higher this year, somehow you got worse. That's learning to adjust to a new set. There's a lot of things that go into it. So, I would certainly expect going into this week, when Mal is healthy, we would expect Mal and Jamie to be out there. But knowing that if one of them struggles, we're not going to wait forever. We got a kid on the bench who has shown us that she's ready to play in big matches, and she's not afraid of the moment. And so I think that's a real positive for us, that we've learned that we have not just depth, but really, really good depth. Not just, hey, if somebody gets hurt, we can survive with this person, but no, we could actually be really good with this person. So it has its challenges, which every sport does when you have position battles, but those are good challenges. Those are much better than, oh my goodness, if we have a sprained ankle, we're dead. It's not that situation at all for us this year.
Carly goes from a bad injury last year to playing a big role this weekend. What did you see out of her on the court?
She didn't just go from an injury and she wasn't cleared to play for 15 months. She also played a position that she wasn't recruited to play. She was recruited as an outside hitter. And as we had different injuries and sicknesses and different things going on, we asked her to start training in the middle. And then the very next day, Katie goes out. And you're like, oh, well, we were hoping to have some developed depth. We weren't hoping that you would have to do this immediately. And I think she had some high moments and low moments. I think by the end of the weekend, I think she was pretty fatigued. I think worn out. When you go from not playing for 15 months to playing 3 matches in about 24 hours, I think that showed. And I think towards the end of the Villanova match, she was worn out. But I love her as a competitor. And I think that showed in the Western Kentucky match. She struggled the first 3 sets. And all of a sudden we get in the 4th set, or maybe towards the end of the 3rd set, she just started making plays. She was hitting, she was blocking, she was doing a number of things that just, to me, I got to see again some of the things that I saw in her when we were recruiting her. Just a gamer, just a kid that just plays hard, has a good IQ, that knows how to do kind of the little things that help you win. So I thought she was good this weekend. She'll continue to learn that position. She played the position in high school, but didn't play it in club, and obviously wasn't planning on playing it in college. And so part of that it's learning the position, and part of that just the more she plays, the more she will play herself back into volleyball shape and play higher as she returns to the player that she was pre-injury. That just takes time. You don't go out for 15 months and come back and in 2 weeks, hey, I'm ready to go. It takes time, for sure.
I wanted to ask you a couple things about
Sure.
Jamie. You mentioned how her role is transitioning this year on the court, but off the court, now after Abby's graduated, Madison's graduated, she's sort of, the star of this team, the only player picked from this team picked, in the All-MAC preseason poll. How have you seen her try to transition her role off the court from being a younger player playing under those, players with much more experience to now being sort of the girl on the court?
I don't know that we need her to be the kid necessarily. I think we have a number of players that can be the kid on any given night. I think she's one of them, certainly. And I think there are some nights that she will be, but I don't think she needs to kind of carry that pressure. I think Mal is, I know Mal is our best all-around player, and I don't think it's really close with any other player on the team. I believe Allie, when healthy, can be one of the best players in the MAC. I really believe that. And a lot of people don't maybe see her play enough to know that. She's in a position that much more relies on the pass being good. And so that's part of it, that when she hit 500 against Western Kentucky. And she'll continue getting, I think, healthier as the year goes on. I think she could be a pretty phenomenal player. I think she could be a kid that a lot of nights the other team's scouting report is all about her. I mean, that's what I see kind of out of Allie. And I think Jamie, depending on the night, can certainly be that kid. But I don't think we need her to be that kid right now. I think there are some teams, they have one kid. And if they're off, the team's off. You know, I don't necessarily see us being that. I think Katie had some matches in the spring that Katie went from being a pretty good player to, wow, she's really good. I mean, she's so much stronger playing higher now. I think that was a big difference this weekend. We were playing several teams that they were commit blocking away from our middle. Every time we ran our middle behind on a slide, they would run the middle the other way, which is not uncommon. They could not have done that with Katie. I mean, Katie would have blasted balls, and she would have gotten kill after kill after kill, and our opponents would have had to change their strategy. You know, and so I look at the 5 attackers that we believe that we'll have out there, and I think all of them can score. I mean, I think we have a freshman middle that we would ask to probably be the last offensive option out of that group, but she's pretty good. You know, so I really think we have 5 kids that can score. I don't think we have any kid on our team that needs to carry the weight of, if I'm bad, then we're bad.
You mentioned last week a little bit about not wanting your younger players to pretend to turn into anybody else or try to be anybody else, just be the best versions of themselves. Speaking of that sort of comparison, have you ever seen anybody hit the ball as hard as Jamie does, and really be able to start a set the way she does?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of kids that hit the ball with pace. I think she gets pretty excited, when she plays, and I think if there are 3,800 fans there Friday night watching the game, the person who gets most excited when she hits the ball hard is Jamie. She just loves it. That's just how she's wired, and I think some of the struggle Friday night is some of her frustration, and mine as well, is that there were several balls that she could have hit hard that for whatever reason she chose to, hit shots, and that's her being out of character, for herself. And that's something we talk about sometimes with our kids. Look, it's about knowing who you are, knowing yourself well, and then not going too far outside of that. Some kids are all about, just really, really high intelligent play, but they're not wanting to just go bang a ball and go nuts. That's part of what drives Jamie. I mean, she loves being in the moment. I mean, she loves hitting the ball hard. She loves celebrating. So certainly that's something that we want her to do, that she wants to do. I think this weekend, particularly on the go set, which is our faster set to the outside, she was just kind of over-amped, and so she would leave too early. And she jumped from a good spot. I went back and watched all of her jumps. She jumped from a good spot, but she broad jumped past a lot of balls. And so if we wanted to normally hit the ball out here, she was hitting a lot of balls back here because she was just so excited. She was flying past the ball, and you can't hit the ball hard from here. And if you do, your shoulder's not going to like it very much. And so that's part of what we were showing her today on video. Just, sit back a little bit when you jump, because she actually this weekend, she hit over 300 on the high ball to the outside, which is generally the harder ball because it gives time for the block to set up. And she hit a really low percentage on the fastball, which is exact opposite of what Jamie was last year and what she normally has been. And so what's good about the struggle that Jamie had this weekend is she struggled on the thing that she's already really good at, which tells me we can get that back pretty quickly. But she's radically improved something that last year she was not good at. I mean, she hit 100 last year for the whole year on the high ball to the outside. She hit 320 this weekend on the high ball to the outside. And so, again, good problem, and one I think we can fix pretty quickly.
You talked a little bit about Allie's hitting numbers, and then especially against Western Kentucky. I mean, she was just phenomenal.
Right.
But she's not normally in a position that's going to get as many swings as those
Right.
outside girls. Is that something that you guys might look at, trying to get her more swings from that position? I know it's not a position that normally does, but with that efficiency,
Right.
you'd think you'd try to get her converted.
Right. It is. I think there's one part of that can't change, is that she's not a 6 rotation player. And so outsides in our offense, outsides get a fair number of attempts out of the back row as well. And so, of course, Allie won't get those attempts. But if you start comparing front row swings by our lefts to our right, certainly we need to get her more swings, and that starts with the pass. And because she's a one-footed attacker, the angles you take, I won't try to get too deep on it, but it's a lot easier to set an outside hitter from the medium to poor passes. The goal is to get rid of a lot of the medium to poor passes and make them good to medium or great to good passes, and then we can get her more balls. I think the other part of that is our setters understanding that what we consider in system is probably a little different than some other places. We consider in system, if we're still 10 foot off the net, if we're running forward 10 feet, we feel like we can still pump that ball back to her. And I don't know that our setters fully grasp that yet, that we can still go fast from there. And I think our setters are talented enough to do it. They just don't quite grasp that it's okay. And so I think the more we do that, the more they develop trust with each other, and the more that communication develops. I think Allie can and should get more swings, because like you said, if the efficiency is that high, it's not rocket science. Set the kid who's killing every ball. We want to do more of that for sure.
And that kind of led into my next question. When you have someone like Abby, and the passing this weekend was not what you
Right.
wanted it to be, but someone like Abby from last year, maybe sometimes she can make those bad passes look okay.
Right.
Kind of, can you talk about her and just on her converting on those bad passes? What do you think she needs to? I mean, she's only a freshman,
Right.
so I know there's certainly plenty of room to grow. But what is the area there that maybe she can improve on those nights that the passers aren't converting as well as you?
Yeah, I think what's difficult, and I said this the whole time that we had Abby, is that she was a good setter, but she was a phenomenal athlete. I mean, just top 2, 3, 4% athlete at the setter position in the country. And so it's not like we have two setters now that are running in molasses. I mean, it's not like they can't move, because honestly, our setters were probably similar in speed to the Western Kentucky setter, to probably a little faster than the Villanova setter. Gulf Coast played two setters. One of them was probably a little quicker than our kids. One of them was definitely slower than our kids. But it's just everyone here is used to below average pass still equals two hands on a ball, pumping it to the outside. And so what needs to happen for those kids won't realistically happen this season. It's foot speed. And it's unfair to them a little bit, because again, you compare them to the other setters' foot speed in this tournament, which were all good teams. They're not slow. But you compare them to a kid that was here last year, and everyone's like, oh. And that's part of everyone on our team adjusting too, because a poor pass that last year, kid flies through in sets. This year, someone else may need to step in and set. And that's just part of everyone learning that our personnel is different every year. And, well, you know what? It's the exact same thing the other teams were doing. Other people were stepping in and setting the ball. No problem. But we just have to adjust and learn and communicate. And it's okay to call help as setters. It's okay for other people to step in and set the ball as we're learning the limits of everyone. I mean, it's true for the setter. It's true for a blocker. I'll take Karin, for example. Karin was not speedy, but Karin, incredibly high IQ. And so she almost always closed the block. And so our 6-zone defender, their job is to wait, see if the block closes, and then go to their defensive assignment depending on where we have them on that evening. And there are many times this weekend our kids were going, assuming that it was going to close, and then it didn't. And so then the other teams got kills right in. And so, again, it's adjusting personnel. Same thing with Mare. I mean, just et cetera, all the way down the line. Every year your personnel is different. And so you have to learn the limits of everyone around you, have to learn their strengths and their weaknesses, and then develop the system that works the best for you. And I think we're still, as coaches and as players, figuring that out. And that takes time. Because, like I said, even there were some returners that I thought had weaknesses exposed this weekend that I didn't know, because they had been covered up by someone else playing next to them. And so it just takes time to really understand how we're going to play, the system that makes the most sense. But I think that they're learning, they're developing. I think the kids we have will be good enough to win a conference championship. Every year looks different. The way we've won it the last couple of years was different than the way they won it before, and the way they won it before was different than the way they won it way before. And that's just part of it's okay. There's no set way you have to win. You just have to win. And that's how we need to approach this week is what can we do this week to get better with this group right now to be effective tomorrow and to be effective Friday and Saturday.